Welcome to the Holding Time podcast. Here we discuss breastfeeding in all its complexity, the ups and downs, the challenges and the triumphs. Whether you are expectant, a new mother, or simply interested, I hope you'll appreciate the incredible warrior women featured in this series. In this mini-series, we go back to feature some mothers who helped to shape the Holding Time project in Coventry. These interviews took place over Zoom in 2020, quite often under lockdown. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Find out more by visiting holdingtime.org or support us on our Patreon channel, Holding Time.
So you're 36 weeks pregnant, am I right?
37 now, yeah.
Woo!
Yeah.
Your other little one, are they at school? No, they're...
My eldest would normally be. My youngest, or middle one, I suppose.
I didn't realise this was your third.
So yeah, this is number 3. So yeah, my eldest is 5. Dulcie is 3.5. I'm still feeding. And then this one's due at the beginning of March. So yeah. I'm pretty sure I remember being breastfed. My mum says I breastfed till quite late, till about 2.5. And I swear I have a memory of breastfeeding, which sounds ridiculous, but I just had this sort of image. So I think I just kind of went into assuming that I'd be fine because everyone else I knew were absolutely fine with it. And it was never really spoken about times when it could be quite difficult or intense or, you know, anything like that.
Was it that you knew that had breastfed? So is that your peer group or is that your family?
My family, my sister, her 3, and my younger sister actually had hers first before I had mine. My cousins, I've got loads of cousins and they all very happily and openly breastfed at parties and things. And yeah, and family friends who had kids. So it was never something that seemed unusual to me. So I think moving to Coventry, because I'm not from Coventry originally, I think moving to Coventry and seeing that there was this sort of, this real push, it's a great place for support. There's lots of support here, which is really good, and I feel really lucky that I had that. In a funny way, I've never really seen bottle feeding necessarily, so it's quite strange from that perspective. And I think that's why I was so determined to do it. Partly that, and my first was actually, she's an IVF baby, so I really wanted to prove that my body could do something at least, do you know what I mean? So the subsequent 2 have been lovely surprises. But yeah, I think with Tabby, I definitely came out of the pregnancy still feeling quite sad about my body not doing what it was meant to do. So I was really determined that I wanted to breastfeed. And when it was really hard, really painful and really intense, I found that really, really tough.
Did you have her assess the tongue tie? Because I hear quite a lot of women who, I mean, this is anecdotal, but women who have IVF, I had IVF myself, I had a tongue-tied baby, and one lactation, the consultant who diagnosed it said that there's sort of breaking research that suggests that folic acid, and taking folic acid for a long period of time can cause...
Oh, really? That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I had, like I say, I had the local team have people that will come to you. They had a look for tongue tie. They didn't spot it. I don't think the lady that came to our house was lovely, but I think she was quite new to the job. So she kind of looked and said, oh, it could be, but every time I had the thing where everyone was like, well, they look fine.
How did your nipples look? They looked like lipstick.
Oh, they were not happy at all.
When they came out of the baby's mouth.
Yeah.
That's posterior tongue tie. And it's tickling. And it's tickling.
Yeah.
That, basically, someone who's trained in posterior tongue tie would recognise.
Yeah.
Sound like a know-it-all, but
tell
about the posterior tongue tie.
Really? Yeah.
And those are the classic 2 symptoms.
Okay. Yeah,
why it was so painful.
I knew that Tabby it wasn't a very efficient feed. She wasn't putting on weight very well. But everyone just sort of looked and sort of said, oh, well, it looks, the positioning looks fine. But it was like...
said to me. And then I've got double mastitis on day 10.
Really? Yeah, well, I couldn't wear a bra for a really long time.
I know, yeah.
Painful.
Horrible engorgement and stuff.
Yeah. So when Dulcie, it was really different. I mean, I do still think she has quite a shallow latch compared to how. I mean, she felt like an absolute dream straight away. So.
But neither of those plans, so possibly weren't taking the folic acid. I mean, just to pursue.
No, I wasn't even taking folic acid. You know, I didn't even realise we were pregnant for a good sort of 9 weeks before I suddenly thought, hang on a minute, something's not right. Yeah.
Really
and actually, one of the things that made me think, was that Tabby didn't like the taste of my milk anymore.
Yeah.
So she would want to feed, and I'd feed her, and then she'd just look at me and go, and I thought, that's strange. Like, as if she was like, why are you trying to poison me? But she was desperate to feed. So I was like, something's odd here. So that was quite funny. But with Dulcie, that didn't stop her at all. She carried on feeding throughout, so obviously it didn't change the taste or anything this time round. She was just so determined to feed. I mean, I don't even know whether she gets very much milk, to be honest, at the moment. I think it's just a comfort for her at the moment.
People say that breastfeeding toddlers, I mean, I don't know if you call her a toddler, but it's just a comfort. But actually, the Parenting Science Gang, which is this citizen science project, they did a whole study with a molecular spectrometer or something it's called. It's a really, really subtle tool. It's like the thing that they use, in cancer operations to see whether the cells are cancerous or not. It's like the special thing that analyzes the smoke of something. Anyway, they did a study. They got 200 women to come and express their milk in Imperial College. And what they found was revolutionary, basically, the findings. Still not been published. Still no funding for a proper longitudinal study that can absolutely concretely prove what they found. But what they found was that every single sample was individualized to every single child.
Wow.
That it was actually not the differences that we're told in terms of, at 6 months, the milk changes. No, it doesn't. Mm-hmm. The milk changes hour to hour, child to child. So every single child is getting a completely unique feed.
Wow.
And even from different breasts of the same mother. So a newborn on one breast is getting completely different milk to a toddler on the other breast. So your toddler would not be getting colostrum.
No. Yeah, this is the thing, because I wonder whether that's starting to come in. Yeah, but like you say, that's true. I have heard that.
I mean, it's just
from
beyond comprehension.
They can tell that it sort of figures out what is needed, and
who knows how. Size or it's just extraordinary.
Yeah.
So it's very comforting to toddlers, and I'm sure it gives them it gives them protection, and that's never been more important than now. But actually, it's doing stuff for them that we just don't even have the tools to measure what it's producing.
Mm-hmm.
So
interesting. Okay.
If people say it's for them, there's that misconception that it's just for their. Or some people say, oh, you're still breastfeeding, that's just for you. It's like absolutely categorically incorrect. I don't think any mother I've met on this entire programme, and I've met these dedicated breastfeeders, would ever be doing it longer than a day longer.
Yeah, I love it dearly.
Yeah. But it's not something that you're persuading a child to do, is it?
No.
And similarly, I don't think that children, from what I've seen, and I've spoken to quite a lot of breastfeeding mothers and children, it just doesn't seem that, it's very poorly understood the need that children have for breastfeeding into childhood.
Yeah.
And so I want to ask you about your background, because I know you said you're not from Coventry, but I don't often speak to British women who have an inheritance of breastfeeding culture. I mainly speak to British women who were not breastfed, but who themselves decided to breastfeed, and then kind of maybe their friends did breastfeed, or they had a mentor who helped them breastfeed. But that doesn't sound the case with you. I'm interested to know, like, your parents, you know, what was their background? Like, did they come from a culture that had was unbroken, or were they hippies, or, you know, what?
Yeah, well, I think partly, I think my dad would have been breastfed. I haven't asked him. But I mean, his mum was a lot older. She had my dad was born in the late 40s, but his mum was already in her early 40s when she had him. And I know she breastfed her other 3 children who were sort of in their teens and early 20s when my dad was born. So I can't imagine she would have suddenly decided to use a bottle. I've heard a funny story. She had my uncles and auntie in Australia. They moved to Australia for a little while. And she told a story of how her and another mother that were, well, I guess they were in some sort of mother and baby sort of place together. Yeah. Basically, they were advised, because one of them was producing loads of milk and my grandma wasn't, didn't appear to be. So the suggestion was that they swapped babies and fed each other's babies, because to try and, one baby was obviously quite good at inducing the milk, and the other baby needed to put on weight, so they kind of swapped.
Was that in Australia?
That was in Australia, I think. I'm not entirely sure, but I vaguely remember hearing that story.
That's definitely something people used to do in the past. Yeah. You know, I've got friends who are Estonian, and they have a totally unbroken breastfeeding tradition because of the Soviet bloc. I mean, formula didn't exist. That's why I'm asking, you know, what's their background? Are your parents are both British?
Yeah, they're both British. My mum wasn't fed. My mum was bottle fed, but I think she was quite determined when we were born that she wanted to breastfeed. And I think she got the whole sort of, oh, well, I bottle fed you and you're fine kind of thing. And I think she's just very, she likes to do things her way. So she was just very much like, no, I don't care. So yeah, and again, she tells me that, I mean, I was clearly a bit like Dulcie. I enjoyed my milk. Even when she was pregnant with my sister, I was still feeding from her. I think she said I was feeding till about 2.5, 3-ish. She's never really spoken to me about it. It was just, I just knew and I guess I've got a younger sister as well, so I must have memories of her being fed as well. But yeah, all my cousins are much older because my dad is much younger than his brothers and sister. My cousins were all older, so when they had kids, they all just breastfed. And a lot of my parents' friends, I think, were quite similar. They're like folkies, Morris dancers, so they're all quite traditional in that way. So yeah, any sort of family friends that had small babies all breastfed, and it was just all quite. That's just what I just saw. Yeah, didn't often see bottles at all growing up. So in that sense, it's quite interesting. But yeah, no, they're both British though. Yeah, my mum's from Corby and my dad is from Sussex. So.
You're lucky to have that. I mean, I just think it is quite rare, even down here in Brighton, you know, if you say your dad's from Sussex, I don't meet many women who are British who have had, well, Liz actually is someone that would have that same background, but lots of the women that I meet who have grown up around breastfeeding and who have a very uncomplicated relationship with breastfeeding as a result, because that's what I really noticed. Mm-hmm. They are typically black and minority ethnic, you know, they're Brazilian, they're Chinese, or like I say, they might be Estonian, but in Britain there was just such a cut that happened in the 60s. I think what it might be is that you're a bit younger than me, and I think that probably in the 80s the information started to come through that breastfeeding was really important. And I remember when I was about 10, my mum and her friends talking about breastfeeding as, you know, oh, apparently some women want to do breastfeeding again. And we were all like, what's breastfeeding? We'd never even heard of it. And they told us, and we just thought they were lying to us, you know. We thought it must be not true. And so I would be just that bit older than you, and I think therefore I come from that generation that was bottle fed, whereas your mum is progressive enough to kind of adopt that. They're early adopters.
Yeah, I think.
She was breastfed. She's like the equivalent of me, isn't she?
Yeah, I think partly probably being with my dad probably was, and I can imagine. I haven't asked him to go or her. I can imagine him just assuming that would be the normal way because that's what he was used to as well, I guess. And I can imagine my mum sort of. She's quite headstrong and quite she does things her way. So I can imagine her sort of wanting to do things naturally, as naturally as possible and most conveniently as well, I suppose. Yeah, but even with both my sisters having fed before me as well, I never really heard about how tricky it could be.
And who helped you when it was really tricky? I mean, how did you get through that? Because a lot of women have just stopped.
It's sheer bloody determination on my personally, because it was incredibly hard. I still have scars on my nipples now to show for it. And I think partly it was down to I just expected that was the way it was going to be. So I kind of had it in my head that, well, it has to work because that's how I wanted to work. And I think also having had Tabby through IVF, I think I was determined to sort of prove to my body that I could do it. And I think I spent £200 on my mobile in the first month of Tabby being born. That was just phoning my family, my sisters and my mum for support. And that was really, I was a bit shocked when I realised my phone bill, but looking back, it was £200 well spent.
So you got telephone support from family members?
Yeah. I phoned the National Breastfeeding Helpline as well in the early days. And then obviously in Coventry, we've got a breastfeeding support, a feeding support group who you can go to meetings. So I actually went to one of the meetings with a friend.
Can you imagine going through that struggle now with, no baby?
It's hard anyway, having a newborn, especially the first time mother. Because I teach pregnancy yoga as well. So through the first lockdown, and actually now I'm still teaching for a couple more weeks actually. Yeah, I have a lot of first time mums and yeah, I don't know how they've done it this year. It's just...
Well, they don't know what they're missing out on. They haven't had it. But the thing is, the support that's there isn't enough for most women in a normal sense.
Absolutely.
So I think there will be ramifications, but it's the sort of silent suffering, isn't it? The hidden.
This is it. Yeah, and I think it's very easy as well when you're a new mum to, a bit like in birth actually, it's very easy to assume that you don't know what you're doing and therefore you just revert to what everyone else tells you when actually everyone else's advice might have worked for them but isn't necessarily what's best for you, and it's really hard to get that confidence, I think, unless you're around people. And
I think that's right. I think what you get from talking to other mothers is a much stronger sense of your own ability. Yeah. And I think if you don't have access to that, then you're much more likely to rely on books and websites, and they can be quite mixed. And a lot of the industry around books is very toxic. Yeah. It's not based on baby behaviour, it's not written by paediatricians, it's written by maternity nurses who are trying to cash in on their celebrity, blah, blah.
Yeah.
They're really toxic. I mean, you must know that after 3 children that are not useful at all.
No, well, it's funny, even health visitors I find can be unhelpful at times. I've had a couple of run-ins where I've had unhelpful advice or unhelpful words, and luckily most of them were at a point where I was quite confident in my own sort of ideas of what I wanted to do. But
was that around breastfeeding, or was that
around... Yeah, I remember when...
Motherhood or sleeping?
All of those really, because I was feeding Tabby twice a night, 2 or 3 times a night when I went for my 12-month review thing with her. I remember the health visitor saying, "Are you back at work yet?" And I was like, "No, not yet." And she was like, "Well, you'll have to get that sorted before you go back to work, because you'll need your sleep." And I just thought, okay, that's the agenda, is just getting me back to work. And it doesn't matter what Tabby wants, as long as I'm getting enough sleep so I can be productive for society. That's very help coming out of there. So, yeah.
It's judgmental on a number of levels, that comment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Firstly, some mothers decide not to go back to work, so
why is
that the relevant point?
Absolutely.
Why, as a health visitor, why is she advising you to be non-child centred?
Yeah. I think she even said to me, "They know how to work here," and I was like,
"Oh my God."
Aye. Yeah, I went out there thinking, well, that was a waste of my time.
It does worry me that women will be not exposed to good advice. They'll be subject even more to those market forces, and those market forces are just so unhealthy. They're so anti-breastfeeding in every way. Breastfeeding in those books is always presented as the problem, not the cure. Breastfeeding is the cure for almost everything.
Yeah,
It's the problem.
Absolutely. No, it's funny. We ended up going back into hospital actually with Tabby because of the feeding.
I've noticed that in Coventry they take mothers back in. It seems quite a good thing. I mean,
it is. It was good in some ways, but there wasn't a breastfeeding specialist available to. They wanted me in overnight. Basically, Tabby picked up blood, but it was my blood from my nipples. So we ended up in A&E, but they admitted us overnight. And I had a really lovely nurse who had some breastfeeding training, but even she was like, right, what you want to do is feed them every 3 hours. So, you know, Tabby was only, you would have been about 5 days old, I think. Yeah, and I was kind of been given this advice to structure when she fed. And so when we came home and she wanted to feed more than that, I was a bit like, I don't know what to do. And then finally you kind of give and you go, actually, no, I'm just going to feed her when she wants to be fed, actually.
Yeah.
There's obviously still things like that happen even now. But yeah, I mean, the breastfeeding team were great here. And it was great just having a place to go. I mean, we carried on going till Dulcie was born. And I mean, it was just like a social for us in the end. And you kind of I felt guilty for going again because Tabby would only feed maybe once or twice a day at that point, and she was terrorising the really tiny baby. But in a way, it's nice because obviously the new mum's there. You know, you're there to sort of be able to give a little bit of insight.
And you're also, if you do feed in front of them, you're normalising feeding a 1-year-old, and that's so important. If it's just all mothers who are all inexperienced, all talking to each other, then it's a bit blind to some degree, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really, you need experienced mothers to go to those things.
Yeah.
It's something we don't have enough in society, is just like experienced mothers sitting about with inexperienced mothers, maybe when they're pregnant, giving advice. Yeah.
I mean, I remember getting some advice from a friend when I was pregnant, and her advice was, and this is kind of the downfall in a way, and this is where I've realised I have to take everything with a pinch of salt and do my own research. But she said, in the beginning it's really painful, and you know, you just have to get past that painful bit, and then it's fine. And I thought, okay, I can do that. I can do pain. That's fine. But everyone's level of pain is different and discomfort is different. And pain I was experiencing was...
My palms used to start sweating at the thought of breastfeeding. It was like having someone drive a nail into my nipples. I'd cry
and apologise because I'm like, I really want to feed you, but I'm really scared. And it would be like sort of hold my breath, put you on, get past the worst and hope that we have a half decent feed this time.
I ended up bottle feeding my daughter for 4 months. I had to express because the damage of the mastitis was so immense, and so she was a bottle fed baby. And then the reason why I got really interested in breastfeeding is because after having a tongue tie cut, she went back to breastfeeding. And I was able to compare a bottle fed baby with a breastfed baby, and I was able to compare myself, and it really was different. I mean, even though she was getting breast milk, it really wasn't the same.
It's funny. It's the same. I was expressing And I felt guilty because they always say, oh, don't give them a bottle before 6 weeks, it will confuse them. And at 2 weeks, I was like, well, I have to give her a bottle.
Yeah.
It's excruciating. So
Yeah.
I did it. And again, I think I cried before I gave it to her. I felt so awful.
Yeah, isn't it?
A milk still. But yeah, it's the thing of, you can't be as intuitive, and you can't, because there would be times where it'd be the middle of the night and I hadn't expressed yet. So I'd have to quickly express while she was there crying, wanting to feed, and then I'd feed her, and I just felt awful. And then I'd think, well, I better express again. So you're not sleeping very well, so you express again, and it's not easy, and it's just
all a battle. It's all a battlefield, isn't it? And it's all individual women kind of going through it on their own. I don't think one art project can solve all of this, but in a way, it gets people thinking about breastfeeding in different ways. Hopefully, it shares. My intention really with each of these interviews is to share something of how individual each experience is, and for the mothers that don't have experienced mothers to talk to, they can at least listen in.
I think anything like this is just really good for new mums and, well, women generally that have or wanted to or want to breastfeed. I think it's...
Well, if you manage to do something that's good for mothers, then basically you're doing something that's good for everyone, aren't you?
Totally.
Everybody has a mother.
Absolutely.
Ultimately.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening, and thanks to everyone involved, our funders, the Infant Feeding Team and University Hospital Coventry and Warwick for their support, along with all the amazing mothers and partners who helped to make this project happen. You can learn more about the project by visiting holdingtime.org and support us on our Patreon channel. There's a link in the description. Thanks for listening, and be sure to like, follow or subscribe so you don't miss any of our content.